Good evening, and welcome to today's edition of A Plate with Sion Marshall. It's another Thursday, and I know you've been waiting for this program. Well, the program begins right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're on one of our platforms, on YouTube, Uplate with Sion Marshall, or on Facebook, Uplate with Sion Marshall, or you joining from another platform or someone's um, page or account that shared, thank you so much for being a part of tonight's program. As always, I encourage you to take a few seconds and share the program so that individuals know what you're watching and they can watch along with you. Now, this evening, as you notice, the background and all that stuff is a little different. So let me apologize. Some technical issues with popped up. And so I've had to record this program ahead of time, and I'm recording it actually at my university campus. So I'm in one of the classrooms recording, so it looks different, not the regular backdrop and so forth. And I'm not in my jacket and tie and so forth. But no doubt, we are going to have the same exciting, informative, educational program as always. So listen, you're here, call a friend, message a friend, let them know that A Plate with Sion Marshall is on. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. Where do I start? Cricket. West Indies cricket. Listen, I just love the guys, and no matter what happens, I will always support the West Indies cricket team. So last week and earlier this week, I am very much excited. I thought the bowling wasn't very good for the first two sessions, but to bowl out England in the third session of day one, fantastic. I was happy. And then we went in, started a bit. Well, we got a good start from the we had a good start, a relatively good start. And to see that we actually posted in excess of 400 and gave a lead of 41 runs. I mean, this was beautiful. I thought, wow. Then England's second innings was just crazy. I don't know what our bowlers did. I mean, there's just something about our bowlers. I don't know. I wouldn't want to refer to them as mediocre, but there's just not that aggression, and there seems not to be the same level of accuracy and consistency that other bowlers have, like England bowlers, for example. So England racked up a horrible score, another 400 runs. Again, we had a fairly okay start. The captain looked solid, and I thought, yes, we may not win this. We may not even draw, but let me see some fight. Let's go 200-300 runs. So I sat down in the library in my school, in my university, and I have my laptop on cricket, distracted instead of doing the studies to watch West Indies get bowl out for next nothing. I mean, and it just happened like in one session. Really, that was the most disappointing thing for me. But for those of us who have grown accustomed to West Indies cricket, I guess by now we know what to expect. But I can't help but support the boys and rally around with them and encourage them. They're in Birmingham. They're going to be at Edgbaston from tomorrow. I wish the team all the best. I will be supporting you. I will be voting for you. And I hope that I can see a better performance than you had during the last test. All right? We're going to do. Again, the Olympics starts this weekend, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines has a team made up of two runners and I think two swimmers, Shafiq Maloney, who will be doing the 800 meters, and Mr. Handel Roban, who will be doing the 800 meters in the male division, and two swimmers who I think will be doing 50-meter freestyle. I wish them all the best. All of us here at Uplift with Sean Marshall wish those athletes all the best. Go out, fly the flag high. I saw the uniform. The kids look really good. Go fly the flag high, represent St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All right, so let's talk. This evening, I am going to take you on a whirlwind tour from North America to Africa to Asia and come right back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So buckle up and let's go. The big news this week early was that President Joe Biden has decided to not contest re-election, even though he had already done the primary and he was the presumptive nominee, and he was expecting to go into the Democratic convention to be for it to be ratified and so forth. After a while, he was ill. He was out of the scene for a couple of days, and then boom, the news came that Joe Biden was not contesting re-election, which allowed for, or which is going to allow for possible history. The first African American, Caribbean, African American, Asian, or rather woman of color nominee in the US, and possibly in the USA, and possibly the first Black president, Black first female president. This is something that is going to be historic. But I want just to share with you the breaking news, how it was done on Fox News when the news broke that Biden was not going to contest re-election. This is what it sounded like.
Fox, and we have some breaking news as President Joe Biden has just announced that he is dropping out of the 2024 presidential race. This happening just moments ago. You are taking a look at the letter that he has just issued, and we are going to read it in its entirety. It says, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today." It goes on to say, quote, "I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it had been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I have always, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America." The letter signed Joe Biden.
So that was the letter that was written and that was read out by all of the media in the US and globally, because this was big news globally that President Joe Biden was no longer running for a second term. What happened was then he endorsed Kamala Harris, his vice president, who would now take up the mantle of the Democratic Party and go forward to contest against the Republican nominee, former President Trump. Now, excuse me, a throat thing happening, so please forgive me. Now, lots of things have happened since the announcement from President Biden and the endorsement of Vice President Harris. A number of high-profile individuals have come out and voiced their support for her. There's a group, a female group, that had a record-breaking event on Zoom, over 40,000 participants, that raised a lot of money. Black men had the same type of event, raised money. As a matter of fact, in a couple of days, or in the first day, with all of these donations, it is said that Vice President Harris has broken the record for fundraising in all of U.S. politics, raising over $100 million. So clearly there is some excitement about Vice President Harris, and this goes against everything that at least I had heard from polls and pundits and so forth, that she wasn't very well liked, she was stiff. The fact that her record as state's prosecutor and attorney general in California was horrible, and she incarcerated so many black men and all of those things. But yet, even recently, I was seeing a clip with Steve Kornacki on CNN, where he was comparing favorability ratings between her and Trump. So you never got this sense that she would be able to energize the Democratic base like she has, especially minorities, women, people of color, and so forth. But based on what you're seeing in these early stages, she has been able to, and there's seriously some excitement about VP Harris's nomination and potential run for the presidency going forward. And so now we just sit and wait to see what that translates to. Congratulations to VP Harris, and well done, President Biden. And now we watch to see what the US does when November comes. All right. So we move on from that. And the folk in the US, you'll keep me updated. Now, I want to shift the topic a little bit and talk about something that has been trending and seems to be almost contagious in one form or other across the globe. And that is the idea of protests, but not just protests, Gen Z or youth protests. And I want to discuss some of the causes of the youth protests, and equally as important, the responses from the leaders and the governments to those protests, and then bring that back home to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because, there is a lot of discussion about, when I say a lot of discussion, I'm talking about at home, where people who would like to agitate and create chaos, how they speak of St. Vincent and the Grenadines when their attempts at chaos and agitation fail. So we start with the US. Recently, after the start of the war in Palestine that Israel waged on the innocent civilians in Palestine, there has been a lot of protests that sparked across the globe, in major cities, in London, in Manchester, in Paris, across the globe. Individuals were protesting the injustice, what is still considered to be genocide and the targeting of civilians in Palestine by Israel, a mighty power, against almost defenseless people, or rather defenseless people. But more recently, those protests shifted to college campuses, where students decided that they were going to protest their university's involvement and investment in things related to Israel. And their protests were for what was called divestment. Stop investing in these companies and so on that are aligned to Israel, and invest elsewhere. It is interesting to note that in all of these protests, whether it's on college campuses or in major cities, that many Jews were involved and participated, also protesting and demonstrating against what they see as injustice against the Palestinian people. So the characterization that somehow these protests were Hamas sympathizers or terrorist sympathizers or anti-Semites really was false. Because if you looked at it, you would see many Jewish individuals, and it is there that the separation between Judaism and what do you call what's the word now? The word has escaped me. Zionism, which is the creation of a Jewish state, they're different. You can be a Jew but be an anti-Zionist. And so many of the Jews, if not all of them, who protested and joined the movements were saying, look, I am Jewish, but I cannot condone what the state of Israel is doing. In instances, especially in the US, those protests turned violent as law enforcement descended on those protesters, arrested, got into violent clashes with those young people. Interestingly, and this is one of the most, as I said, interesting things that I've observed with the US system. If there is one thing that unites the entire political elite of the US, is Israel. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. When it comes to Israel, all bets are off. Hands off. Don't you dare criticize Israel. From Hakeem Jeffries to Mike Johnson, it's as if there was one song sheet. And I could never understand that. But if you follow the discussions, you then are open to things like the lobbying power of Israel, AIPAC. Israel, I can't remember the name of the acronym, so I wouldn't even go into that. But AIPAC, AIPAC, American Israel Political Action Committee, yes, right. And how many of these politicians are funded by AIPAC? And AIPAC is smart. They fund politicians on both sides, Democrat and Republican, so that whenever it comes to Israel in any of the houses of whether it's Congress or Senate, you have almost unanimous response. The few individuals on the Democratic side who dared to stand up, Representative Tlaib, AIPAC tried to get her out through funding primary challenges. The single Palestinian American there, I can't remember her name now. They were extremely successful in primarying Representative Bowman, who they were able to defeat in the primary in New York. Any of those, the few ones who dared to stand up and stand up. What does stand up mean? Say we need a ceasefire. We need an immediate ceasefire. That was enough for AIPAC to turn their wrath on individuals in the US Congress. Could you imagine that? And their own colleagues in the Congress, who they caucus with, couldn't stand up and defend them. So clearly, don't touch Israel, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that's unanimous. Don't touch. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was in Congress recently, and it was amazing to see both Democrats and Republicans standing up and applauding Prime Minister Netanyahu. So that there is almost near unanimous agreement where Israel is concerned on both parts, and I could never understand that. So you had a lot of discourse on the issue of Palestine and Israel's war crimes relating to the way they're prosecuting the war on Palestine. But Israel didn't like that. AIPAC doesn't like that. But what I found strange is that in America, where there's free speech and you can speak anything at all you want about politicians, speak anything at all you want about America, speak anything at all you want, burn the American flag, you can get away with it against America, but not against Israel. And so it was interesting for me to see the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Republican, taking a bunch of his colleagues on the steps of Columbia to essentially curse the students. Listen to Mike Johnson. This is interesting.
Leaders who had come through this institution in the past believed in religious liberty. They believed in democracy. They believed in morality and virtue and the dignity of every human person. They believed in the free exchange of ideas, and they detested mob rule. We are standing here right now on the steps of the Low Library. In this very building right behind us, Columbia University once awarded Winston Churchill an honorary degree, and it was Churchill who said, "It is manifestly right that Jews should have a national home where they may be reunited." We believe in that principle. And today I'm here to proclaim to all those who gnash their teeth and demand to wipe the state of Israel off the map and attack our innocent Jewish students this simple truth: neither Israel nor these Jewish students on this campus will ever stand alone. Today, Hamas issued an endorsement statement of the protesters on this campus. They called them the future leaders of America. It is detestable. All of this has to be said because the cherished traditions of this university are being overtaken right now by radical and extreme ideologies. They place a target on the backs of Jewish students in the United States and here on this campus. A growing number of students have chanted in support of terrorists. They have chased down Jewish students. They have mocked them and reviled them. They have shouted racial epithets. They have screamed at those who bear the Star of David. Enjoy your free speech. They've told Jewish students who wear the Star of David to leave the country. And shamefully, some professors and faculty have joined the mobs. Things have gotten so out of control that the schools canceled in-person classes, and now they've come up with this hybrid model where they will discriminate against Jewish students. They're not allowed to come to class anymore for fear of their lives, and it's detestable. As Columbia has allowed these lawless agitators and radicals to take over, the virus of anti-Semitism is spread across other campuses. By some counts, as many as 200 universities have a similar form of protest right now.
So Representative Speaker Mike Johnson has an issue with students protesting. Now, it was interesting again, and I keep using the word interesting, to see that the US had no issue, whether it's at the state level or what have you, for law enforcement to go in and deal with these protesters in a very heavy-handed way. Even though many videos were circulating that showed that a lot of times the pro-Israel individuals were the ones who went in and agitated and tried to create a situation where none existed. But you see the type of baiting that was done. So Hamas said, these are the future leaders. Oh, and that means they're definitely Hamas. But don't we all say that the young people of today are the future leaders of tomorrow? So we can acknowledge it, but if Hamas does, they're terrorists. I mean, okay, Representative Speaker Johnson, I hear you. All for the name of Israel. Now, thankfully, I'm a little nobody, and my podcast would get a couple hundred views. So I ain't at a risk that nobody cancel me. So I could. So you'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll be able to watch this for a long time. But youth are getting involved and they're getting engaged. And they are defending things that matter to them. And in this case, in the US, it's the issue of Palestine and the injustice that is being meted out, the war crimes being committed, the genocide that's being committed against Palestinians by an Israeli army that's very powerful. And then you have very powerful allies like the US, the UK, and other countries standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel, unable to say, no, you've gone too far. But so we move over and we go to Kenya. where, again, just recently, the passage of a finance bill was the cause of serious protests in Kenya. So much so that young individuals, young professionals came out and asked for 7 days of rage, where they took to the street for 7 days to protest this finance bill. Now, for those of you who have some history, when I heard of the finance bill and I followed what was happening in Kenya, I couldn't help but go back to 1998, or rather 2001. Well, 2000. I'm getting my dates mixed up, but 2000, when the Greedy Bill was passed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and public servants had to take to the street to stop this bill, to have it recanted or rescinded. And as a result of that, because of continued protests, the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines brought down the government of then Prime Minister James Mitchell. So I saw some similarities there. But again, in Kenya, what was interesting, or what was of keynote, is the way, again, the security force clashed with the protesters and killed over 100+ individuals. Now, I reached out to a good friend of mine, someone I studied with previously. She's a lawyer, because she had posted something on LinkedIn. And I said, I would love to do a podcast and discuss a bit of what is happening in Kenya. Would you care to be my guest? And she said to me, you know what, Sian, I'd love to, but under different circumstances. Because one of the allegations she made, and I've heard it being made, is that people have been abducted from their homes and they cannot be found. Their bodies can't be found. They've disappeared. And so she said, for my safety, I would prefer not to speak publicly on this matter. So I didn't get to hear, or rather, get to be able to share her viewpoint, the viewpoint of a Kenyan, on the program. Now, of course, in the Grenadines, protests occur. The agitators and so forth try to create and manufacture things to get people on the street, to try and destabilize the country. And they speak. They do lives, they speak, they do whatever they want to. And, life continues. But let us pay attention to some of the issues that Kenyans were protesting, the real issues that they were protesting. So let's go to Kenya and get a sense of what, and it's still happening, although the president of Kenya has withdrawn the bill, fired his cabinet, and so forth, people are still not pleased. And so there's still protests happening in Kenya. But let us hear some of the issues that the Kenyans were battling or protesting that led to the violence and the deaths of many Kenyans.
After Kenyan police fired on demonstrators as they stormed the National Assembly building. The crowd was protesting against controversial new tax measures being pushed by President William Ruto, and with many already passed by lawmakers. So for more on this, Bloomberg's Ondiro Ganga joins me from Kigali. Ondiro, just walk us through the events that led to this moment. How did we get here?
Jumana, this has been a long time coming. In 2023-2024, the government passed the first finance bill that doubled VAT on fuel, introduced a controversial housing levy at 1.5, and increased income tax. Kenyans protested this, but the government, because they had numbers in parliament, they were able to see this bill through. Come 2024-2025, there's a new finance bill that proposes even more taxes, and some of the controversial clauses were taxes on bread, levies on fuel, import tax that was going to affect sanitary paper towels and diapers. And these rallied Kenyans amongst themselves. This got them really angry because they felt these taxes were going to mop up whatever little liquidity they had left. The government needs these taxes in order to raise revenue, balance their budget, and unlock funding from the IMF. But the people are not on the same page with the government this time around. They lobbied themselves on social media in numbers and hit the streets of Nairobi. Now, while they were out protesting, Parliament was taking a vote on this bill, and it easily sailed through the floor of Parliament because the opposition party did not take a vote. Instead, they joined the protesters in calling for this bill to be dropped altogether. And while this was happening in Parliament, some of these protesters in Nairobi, Kenya, were approaching Parliament. They breached the gate and they gained grounds to the Parliament grounds. And what happened next was the most tragic thing in the recent history of Kenya. We saw police shooting at these protesters using live rounds on live television, and international media was broadcasting showing two lifeless bodies lying outside of Parliament. And the breach of Parliament, according to analysts, just goes to show the magnitude of anger in Kenyans, because this has never happened before, even in 2007 and 2008.
Yeah, pretty shocking images, and we've been showing them now on our screens. IMF, of course, warning that Kenya's debt, 67% of debt to GDP, is getting close to distress levels. And so the government has to do something about the state of their deficits. Either they can try to increase revenue, and in this case, that's being met with a lot of protests, or cut spending. What are the government's options from here?
Jumana, like you said, President William Ruto is caught between a rock and a hard place, because if he sails through with this bill and signs it into law, he unlocks revenue from the IMF, but he's risking socio-political tension in the country. And so what is he to do? Is he to go back to the international market and borrow, but then yields are really expensive and investors are really, they have some doubts about Kenya's fiscal stability. And we saw him come out yesterday. He was very bullish in his tone. He mentioned things like dangerous, criminal, and treason, saying that national security agencies have been deployed to thwart any threat to national security. On the other hand, President Uhuru Kenyatta was the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya, reminding President William Ruto that power was bestowed to him by the people and there's need for conversation. But these protesters are resolute in their determination to hit the streets over and over again until their grievances are addressed.
So we hear what is happening in Kenya. A finance bill was done before, doubled VAT on certain things. Now they're coming back again with another finance bill, increasing VAT, putting VAT on things like bread and diapers and so forth. Now, a lot of the things that Kenya would put in, increasing and doubling VAT on, I think that are either VAT exempt or zero rated in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, I remember when a few years ago, the government increased the VAT by a percentage point from 50 to 16% to create a contingency fund, rather. The opposition tried to make something out of it, and they call it all sorts of wicked. Today, the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines can look back and say, that was thoughtful, insightful, and visionary, because in COVID, the government was able to get some money immediately to start their COVID response. When super erupted, again, the government was able to get some money to start its response immediately, even as we waited for donors to contribute to the process of rehabilitation and rebuilding. And most recently, after Hurricane Beryl, the latest figure I saw was $50 million coming out of the contingencies fund, again, to start immediately with some of the work that needs to be done. Do you think we could have waited and have the residents of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, those from the Grenadines and those from the mainland, whose homes were damaged, who needed to be relocated and so forth, have them on the street for 1 week and 2 weeks while we wait for donors to assist us, or we wait for the IMF or some agency to release some funds? Absolutely not. But because of the visionary proposal of the contingencies fund, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines was able to get some immediate funds to kickstart the process. One percentage point. And you see what it's for, and you see how we're using it. But that didn't stop the agitators. Now, what did they try to do in recent times? Try to create chaos during COVID. And I'm coming back to that because I still have one more stop to make. We stopped in the US, we stopped in Kenya. I want to take us to Bangladesh. Now, just recently we had the T20 World Cup. And one of the teams that played in St. Vincent and the Grenadines at Anna's Vale was Bangladesh. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues came up to me and said, he was watching the match and he saw my prime minister. My prime minister said that he knows their prime minister, Sheikh Hasina, and they met and so forth. And so he was very proud to relate that story to me. Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, even surpassing India in terms of GDP. Google it. You don't have to take my word for it. And a lot of what is happening in Bangladesh is being credited to its current prime minister. A lot of what she has done in improving living standards for Bangladeshi. Now, again, I try to engage some of my colleagues who are from Bangladesh, because there are quite a few of them I study with, to have them as part of the program. And while in every instance, they would willingly sit with me and chat and explain to me what is happening and give me their take. In every instance, whether they support the protest or they are against the protest, they were unwilling to come on the podcast. And they all had their reasons for not wanting to speak publicly on podcasts. One of them jokingly said, anyway, I don't think any Bangladeshi would see anybody from home would see this podcast, so maybe I can come. But jokingly, and then that was the end of that. So there was this unwillingness. But in Bangladesh, serious protest is happening. And again, as you would hear from the clip I'm about to play, military is deployed, students are being killed. So in the US, violent clashes with law enforcement. In Kenya, violent clashes with the army and military. In Bangladesh, again, violent clashes. People are losing their lives. But let's go to Bangladesh.
Soldiers patrol the streets of Dhaka during one of the worst periods of unrest in recent history in Bangladesh. Anger about a quota system that reserves 30% of government jobs for descendants of war veterans boiled over this week. Protesters demanded the policy be scrapped, and the Supreme Court almost did, dismissing an earlier ruling by the High Court.
The Supreme Court has given a solution to the quota system. That is a 93% quota for the general public, 5% for freedom fighters and their kin, 1% for ethnic minorities, and 1% for transgender and physically disabled applicants.
However, the partial victory in the country's highest court has been overshadowed by the severity of the crackdown by security forces. Dozens of student leaders, activists and opposition figures have been arrested. Others are missing. The exact numbers of the dead, injured and arrested are difficult to confirm, with a communications blackout and nationwide curfew in place. A member of the governing Awami League accuses the opposition of hijacking the students' cause.
We are saying whoever is involved in that, they are the miscreants, whether the political party involved in here or the policeman or the law enforcing agencies. In the students' agitation, whatever they're demanding, some other political parties, they are involved in that and they are doing all this vandalism, terrorism.
A judicial commission of inquiry will investigate the causes of the killings and destruction. Despite the court ruling, protesters are refusing to back down and have issued a list of demands. Among them, the resignations of 2 ministers and the release of detained student leaders. Failing this, they're threatening a nationwide shutdown. Mike Lappel, Al Jazeera.
And Tanvir Chowdhury has the latest from Dhaka.
The student leaders today declared that they will not withdraw their protest. They actually called for a nationwide shutdown for tomorrow, Monday, and they will hold funeral prayers all across the country for those students who got killed in the past few days by police action. The situation in the country still remains very tense and volatile. There's been crackdown by police and the military in different locations in the capital Dhaka and other parts of the country. There has been casualties even today. Now, the government has been blaming squarely everything on the opposition political party for the destruction and damage to public property and calling them creating anarchy in the country. Now, there has been at least 70 arrests among the opposition main party, that is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. One of the key student leader, Nahid Islam, was picked up by detective police day before. His whereabouts is unknown. His family went to visit and see if he's there in the detective police headquarters. They denied that he was taken. There was other politician, a student leader who became a politician, Nurul Haq Nulu, was also picked up and his whereabouts is unknown. So there's a lot of detention of students been picked up by detective police, and they're denying that they've been picked up. This is a serious concern because Bangladesh has a record for extrajudicial killing and as well as police picking up people without their trace. So there is a lot of concern within the community, and the country is in full blackout, communication blackout. There's no internet. Telephones are troublesome. It takes several tries before you can get through. Televisions are heavily censored, and situation remains still very volatile. We'll see how things fall out within the next few days and weeks. Tanvir Chowdhury, Al Jazeera, Dhaka.
Excuse me. Now, let me credit, of course, those news agencies whose clips I stole. Public, right? I took clips from Al Jazeera, I took clips from Fox News, and I believe it's CBS and Bloomberg. So those clips are clips that are there on the internet. I merely downloaded them, and I appreciate and I'm thankful for those clips so that I can use them to help to give you a sense of what we're talking about. So just to summarize the issue in Bangladesh, there's a quota system where government jobs are concerned. 30% of the jobs are reserved for the children of the descendants of freedom fighters, veterans who are considered freedom fighters. And the Bangladeshi youth protested, saying that's unfair. In some quarters, in other reports, you would hear it being characterized as jobs being allocated to individuals of the governing party. So it depends on where you get your news story. Again, you can Google it for yourself. Okay, but the thing is, there are students who are in support of it, and there are students who are not, and so also it appeared that those students were clashing. But what is the issue that really drew the world's attention is the way that the military clashed with those protesters, and many, over 100 plus, maybe even more, have been killed. People have disappeared. The communications are cut. As I said, colleagues here are telling me that they've not been able to speak to their family in days. TV censored and so forth. All of this happening, even though the Supreme Court overturned the ruling and say, look, so it's no longer 70% of the jobs for the general public. It's now 93%, I think it is, for the general public, 5% for that same block of family of freedom fighters, veterans, 2% for another group, and another 1% for disabled, and so forth. So it had gone from 70% to 93%. But still, the protesters said, we're not stopping. We want resignation of ministers, and we want people to be released and so forth. And naturally, you hear discussions and talk of the opposition being involved. Whether or not it is responsible or irresponsible of the opposition to join a movement that they see happening and try and organize it and so forth, that's a Bangladeshi decision. Excuse me. But the point there is, again, the way the security forces got involved. So let's come home. We've had in recent years many attempts at protest by the opposition. You had, for example, in 2020, I believe, or 21 during COVID, when we had that time off in September we didn't have carnival that year, and so we had the time off in September, the 2 days holiday. The unions tried to mount a protest, but I was a part of that meeting. You heard the individuals in the meeting who were trying to hijack the meeting and try to be confrontational. You had the protests that occurred in 2021. Now, if you look at the issues in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the jobs, private sector, public sector, but let's look at public sector. The jobs are there. There's no allocation, there's no quota. People apply, people get hired. If you look at the educational opportunities for individuals, scholarships across the globe, national scholarships, individuals, regardless of there are no quotas, no quotas. Whoever you are, you apply, you qualify, that's it, on merit. Young people in our country can say without a doubt that this government continues to provide opportunities for them. And that is one of the reasons why, no matter how much the opposition and other forces try to agitate and create chaos, it doesn't resonate with the young people. It doesn't resonate with the majority of Vincentians, because when I look at what was available for young people when I was 18, when I was 22, when I was 27, when I was 30, and what is available to them now, there's such a significant improvement. And I don't think young people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines or Vincentian young people would be so reckless as to jeopardize their opportunities because of the individuals who want to create chaos. But let's go back to the protests of 2021, when the mob congregated around the courthouse, the Parliament building, when the member of Central Kingstown, in whose constituency the Parliament building lies, made it clear that we are taking the peace out of protest. In other words, we are going to make that protest a violent one, a non-peaceful one. And you saw the actions and the agitations outside as individuals. Their video still going around. Accosted the police, was up in the police face, and one parliamentarian decided, "I'm not going to walk there." We saw all of the images. And even with the presence of police and so forth there, one person got injured. One. You know who the one person was? The Prime Minister of the country. Not innocent civilians, not the instigators of chaos. The Prime Minister. Think back 2 weeks ago, when a similar type of incident occurred with the former president speaking, and what is alleged to be a bullet grazed his ear. You know what happened to the shooter? You know where the shooter is now? But in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, someone in a crowd can throw a stone at the Prime Minister, bust his head, and then people rejoice and beat drum, and then go and defend the accused. In the US, that individual on the roof didn't even get a chance at a trial. Could you imagine that? So let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about the way the independent arms of the government are allowed to function. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the police are allowed to do their job. The judiciary functions. There is no leader in our country calling on the army and the police and using them as their own private bodyguards to go out and henchmen to go out and create damage and cause damage and death on protesters and civilians. That happened in St. Vincent. So regardless of what individuals would like to paint our country as, look at what is happening. Look at what happened in the US. Look at what happened in Kenya. Look at what is happening in Bangladesh. And compare that to protests happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we see it all the time, that these protesters agitate. They do everything possible to try and get a response from the security forces. And in every instance, the security forces exercise restraint. In every instance, the security forces exercise restraint. In every instance, the security forces are allowed to act independently. So we can speak proudly as Vincentians of two things: that even in countries like Kenya, with resources that we don't have, and Bangladesh, that can boast the fastest growing economy, the issues that are affecting everyday young people are foreign to us. Foreign to us. Because our government is not interested in doubling VAT on bread and diapers and so forth. And our government is focused on creating opportunities for young people. So young people do not have to go and protest to get scholarships. They do not have to go and protest for opportunities at internship and skills training. And as our economy expands, young people are getting jobs. Be wary of those who would come to you to try and whisper in your ears and create false dissatisfactions to be able to use you and ride you into creating chaos in our country, causing you to throw away the opportunities that you have. More than that, we know that in our democracy, where there's free speech and freedom of assembly, you have freedom to protest, there's no government using a heavy hand to crush protesters. Even when it is clear and obvious that protesters are agitating, they want a response. Our government, responsible, democratically elected government with responsible leaders across the board, understand that there has to be restraint, that the role of the security forces is to protect, including the Prime Minister. And so there isn't that rush to be heavy-handed and unreasonable with protesters. Protesters protest. People speak. People call radio. If this were protests in St. Vincent and Grenadines, and I wanted, or any agency wanted individuals to speak about the state of the protest, they would have no shortage of people coming forward to say and comment on the protests. But here I am, reaching out to contacts in Kenya, reaching out to colleagues from Bangladesh, and individuals are unwilling to speak. That wouldn't happen in St. Vincent and Grenadines. People talk. You hear them every day. You see their posts on social media. People talk. So I just wanted to bring some of that information to us, to our young people especially, as we come towards the end of the academic year, to start the new academic year in September, when many of our young people will be applying for bursaries for university, will be applying for scholarships, and hundreds of them, instead of being on the street protesting, they will be preparing for university, whether online or in person. They'll be preparing to go away on scholarships. They'll be preparing to embark on an educational journey, starting an internship somewhere because of opportunities presented to them by the government. They would not be protesting an increase in the VAT on bread, or an increase in the VAT on flour, or an increase on the VAT on diapers and so forth. They would not be protesting quotas on jobs and so forth. They would be preparing to take advantage of opportunities provided for them by this government. And I have to talk like that because I have been a recipient of assistance, educational assistance from this government. And I know many thousands of Vincentians have also benefited. And some of them wouldn't do it, they wouldn't say it. So I'm talking for those who wouldn't, and even those who are willing to, but may not have the opportunity, the platform. I am using my platform to talk about it, that we do not have to. Even students who start university without a scholarship, without assistance, they took a loan and so forth, and they run into difficulty, reach out to the government and get assistance. They started on a scholarship that had nothing to do with the government, and they run into difficulty. They can reach out and get assistance. That is the kind of government we have. And I believe our young people are alive to that, are aware, but sometimes they just need to be reminded. So young people, look at what is happening in Bangladesh. Look at what is happening in Kenya. And be grateful for what we have in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Until next week, Thursday, when we will be having another episode of this program. Let me thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you shared the program. I hope you enjoyed the program. And I hope the information tonight has spurred you to go and do a little bit of digging. Go on YouTube, even on TikTok if you have TikTok, and just do some searches for what somebody, even look at South Africa, who just had an election, and look at some of the issues and the complaints that the young people are having. And you'd see that even though things are not perfect in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in many instances, we have it much better than a lot of them. Until next week, see Marshall saying good night.